Soichiro Honda, the founder of Honda Motors, was rejected by Toyota, lost his factory in World War II, and had an earthquake destroy everything he built. He was broke, humiliated, and at rock bottom. But instead of giving up, he turned failure into the fuel for his greatest success. Honda was obsessed with engines. As a young man, he spent years designing a new piston, believing it would change the industry. He took his invention to Toyota, expecting them to buy it, but they rejected him, saying it wasn't good enough. Most people would have quit, but Honda went back, redesigned it, and tried again. Toyota rejected him a second time. He was crushed. He had put everything into this project, and now he had nothing to show for it. Still, he refused to quit. He borrowed money, built a factory, and started producing his own parts. Just when things were finally looking up, World War II hit. His factory was bombed twice, all his hard work gone. But he rebuilt. Then before he could recover, a massive earthquake struck and leveled everything he had left. Honda was left with nothing, no factory, no money, no hope. But instead of feeling sorry for himself, he found a new way forward. With Japan struggling after the war, people needed cheap transportation. He took a simple bicycle and attached a tiny motor to it. That small idea, it changed everything. People loved it. He started making more. Soon his little motorized bikes were selling all over Japan. That business became Honda Motors, which grew into the biggest motorcycle company in the world and later one of the most successful car manufacturers in history. Soichiro Honda was rejected, bankrupt, and lost everything, but he never stopped. If he had quit, there would be no Honda today. When life knocks you down, will you stay down or will you rise up and build something even greater? You could say Soichiro Honda was born with grease under his nails. He entered the world in 1906 in a tiny Japanese village, the son of a blacksmith who also fixed bicycles. As a child, Soichiro helped his father's bike repair shop, mesmerized by gears and spokes instead of school books. In fact, he wasn't much for traditional education. He once forged his family seal out of a rubber bicycle pedal to fake his report card approval. It worked for Honda since his name was symmetrical, but not for his friends with different names. That little mischief got him caught, but it shows you something. Even as a kid, Soichiro was resourceful and bold, unafraid to hack the system to get what he wanted. What he wanted most was machines. As a toddler, he saw his first automobile roll through his village and he was spellbound. He said the oil smelled like perfume to him. He even borrowed his dad's bicycle to chase an airplane demonstration once. He was obsessed with anything mechanical. If you've ever felt that burning passion for something at a young age, you know how Soichiro felt. And if you haven't found your passion yet, take a cue from him. Follow your curiosity relentlessly. At 15 years old, armed with nothing but that passion, Soichiro left his village and headed to Tokyo to find work as a mechanic. Imagine a teenager with no formal education, no money, just a dream to work with cars. He saw an ad for a job at an auto shop called Art Shokai and wrote them a letter asking for an apprenticeship, even though they weren't advertising for one. Who does that? Someone hungry to learn. And it worked. They took him on. So ask yourself, would you have the guts to cold call your way into an opportunity? Honda did. That bold move at 15 set the foundation for everything to come. At Art Shokai in the 1920s, Soichiro thrived. He swept floors and fetched tools at first, but he soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He became a skilled mechanic known for clever fixes and crazy work ethic. His boss, Yuzo Sakakibara, was so impressed that he let young Honda help build a racing car from scratch. And get this, Soichiro built a race car with a salvaged engine that broke the speed record in Japan at the time, over 100 miles per hour. He even drove it in a race. That fearless need for speed was already in his blood. Unfortunately, in 1936, he crashed in a race and nearly died, injuring his eye. That crash ended his driving days, but not his racing spirit. We'll see how racing comes back into his story later on. By his early 30s, Soichiro Honda had learned all he could at the garage. He had a vision. He wanted to start his own company and make his own products. How many 30-year-olds do you know with a confidence to start a manufacturing business from scratch? This is where his real entrepreneurial journey kicks off. And trust me, it almost ended as soon as it began. In 1937, Soichiro Honda took the leap. He invested all of his savings, about $3,200, into a small factory to mass produce piston rings, which were a critical engine part. He was betting everything on his ability to make a tiny piece of metal better than anyone else. His plan was to sell these piston rings to Toyota, the big car company. It did not go as planned. In fact, it was a disaster. After months of work, he delivered his first batch of piston rings to Toyota, and they rejected almost all of them. Imagine the moment. You've poured your heart, your soul, your life savings into a product, and the customer says, "These are junk." Out of 50 rings, only 3 met Toyota's quality standard. Another account says he made thousands of rings and only a few dozen were usable. Either way, almost 90 to 99% of his work was a failure. Can you imagine how crushing that could be? Honda was heartbroken and humiliated. He literally lost a Toyota contract, and with it, his hopes for a successful business seemed to crumble. Now, most people at this point would quit. They'd say, well, I tried, I failed, time to find a stable job. And here's where Soichiro Honda shows the mindset that you as an entrepreneur need to have. He refused to give up. Instead of quitting, he decided to learn from the failure and come back stronger. Remember this the next time you fail. Success represents the 1% of your work, which results from the 99% that is called failure. Soichiro Honda said that, and he lived it. He understood that each failure was telling him something. In this case, it told him he needed more knowledge. So he went back to school, literally. Honda enrolled in a technical school to study metallurgy, the science of metals, so he could figure out why his piston rings were too brittle or too soft. By day, he ran his little factory. By night, he was hitting the books. For 2 years, he experimented, studied, and improved the manufacturing process. And it paid off. By 1939, he had mastered the process and his piston rings were finally good enough. Toyota gave him a contract and his factory began supplying piston rings not only to Toyota, but also to the Japanese military for aircraft. His business, Tokai Seiki, grew to employ over 2,000 workers at its peak. Think about that. He went from catastrophic failure to running a 2,000 employee company because he didn't quit. He treated failure as feedback, not finale. This is failing forward in action. What can you learn from here? Persistence. The science backs it up. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that grit, passion, and perseverance is a better predictor of success than talent or IQ. Soichiro Honda's grit pulled him through. He literally turned failure into fuel. He once said, instead of being afraid of the challenge and failure, be afraid of avoiding the challenge and doing nothing. In other words, the only real failure is not trying. Soichiro's piston ring venture finally found success, but just as things were looking up, the world turned upside down. War broke out. Soichiro Honda's company was humming along, supplying Toyota and others, but then World War II escalated. Japan was drawn into war, and by 1944, Soichiro's factory became a target. Bombs rained down, and an American B-29 air raid leveled his main plant to rubble. If that wasn't enough, in 1945, a massive earthquake struck Japan and destroyed his second factory. In less than a year, everything he'd built, years of effort, all that persistence, was reduced to smoking ruins and twisted metal. Imagine standing in front of your business, the place you poured your sweat and blood into, and seeing it literally collapse in a pile. How would you feel? Most of us would be devastated. Soichiro Honda certainly was in shock. He later said he had no interest in rebuilding the piston ring business for a third time. And can you blame him? He'd been through failure, recovery, success, then utter destruction. This was rock bottom. So what did he do? He didn't immediately jump back into entrepreneurship. In fact, Honda sold the salvageable remains of his factory to Toyota for 450,000 yen, just to have something to start anew. Then he took a break. A really long break by his standards. He spent a year basically in reflection and recuperation. He even went back to college for a bit and studied engineering more, though he never did get a formal degree. Soichiro was now an engineer without a company, without a degree, and nearly without hope. But this wasn't where the story ends, because remember, the day you stop dreaming is the day you die. And Soichiro Honda was not done dreaming. His homeland Japan was also in ruins from the war, and in those ruins, new opportunities were emerging. Necessity is the mother of invention, and Japan needed inventions. The people needed basic transportation to rebuild their lives in a shattered economy. Soichiro saw this need, and once again, he had a crazy idea. It's 1946. Japan is in chaos. Fuel is scarce, money is tight, people are literally rebuilding buildings and lives. Soichiro Honda, now 40 years old, is back in his hometown, figuring out his next move. One day he stumbles on a small two-stroke engine, a tiny surplus military generator motor left from the war, just lying around. Most folks would see a hunk of junk. Soichiro saw opportunity. He famously recalled that moment as a moment of destiny, the spark that would ignite Honda Motor Company. He thought, what if I attach this little engine to a bicycle? People had been tinkering with motorized bikes elsewhere, but in Japan it wasn't common. With gas in short supply, an efficient motorbike could be the perfect solution for easy transport. Soichiro got to work in his shack. He strapped the engine to a bicycle, used a hot water bottle as a makeshift fuel tank, seriously, and rigged a way to drive the wheel. The first prototype shook and rattled, but it worked. He gave it to his wife, Sachi, to test. She became the first test rider, putting up with oil splattering her clothes as she rode around town. People on the street must have thought they were seeing things. A woman cruising by without pedaling. And that was exactly Soichiro's plan. It got people talking. The little motorbike was loud, rough, and imperfect, but to war-weary citizens, it looked like freedom. Honda improved the design, and after his wife's feedback about the oil mess, and began building more. He had limited engines, about 500 of those surplus motors, so he refurbished every single one by hand before mounting it on a bicycle to sell. He refused to put out a shoddy product with his name on it. Even in desperate times, quality was king for him. That's a lesson. Your reputation is built on the quality you deliver, even when resources are scarce. Soon word spread about these motorized bicycles. They were cheap to run and helped people get around quickly. Buyers came from all over Japan to his hometown to get one. Soichiro Honda was back in business, not with piston rings this time, but with a whole new product born of necessity and imagination. By late 1946, Soichiro had officially founded the Honda Technical Research Institute, working out of a little wooden shack with a team of about a dozen men and a dream. That institute title is pretty grand for what basically was a glorified garage lab with an oil-stained floor. They worked day and night on improving a motorized bicycle. When the supply of surplus engines ran out, Honda knew they had to make their own engines to keep going. So in 1947, they developed a new 50cc engine, their first original Honda engine, and mounted it on a bicycle frame. This evolved into a complete motorbike known as the Type A, nicknamed the Bada Bada for the sound it made. It wasn't long before Honda's bikes were in demand across Japan. In 1948, just 2 years after starting from zero, Soichiro took the next big step. He incorporated Honda Motor Corporation as an official company. He knew he needed help to really grow, so he partnered with Takeo Fujisawa, a savvy businessman who joined him in 1949. This was crucial. Fujisawa handled the financial and marketing side, while Soichiro focused on engineering and production. Teamwork and knowing your strengths. This is another key entrepreneurial lesson. Honda was an engineering genius, but admittedly hated dealing with accounting. His wife would poke him about unpaid bills. By bringing in a partner who excelled in business, he freed himself to do what he loved most: innovate. So ask yourself, do you need a Fujisawa in your venture to complement your skills? With a solid team and a growing reputation, Honda Motor Co. took off. Soichiro and his engineers kept innovating new models. In 1949, they released the Type D Dream, Honda's first true motorcycle, complete with a sleek frame and 98cc engine. The name Dream says it all. It was Soichiro's dream becoming reality. But it wasn't easy. Post-war Japan was crawling with competition. About 200 other small companies were also making motorized bikes, all scrambling for a piece of a very poor market. Honda was just one player in a crowded field, an underdog by any measure. So how did Honda break away from the pack? Two things: product quality and smart strategy. Soichiro's engineering prowess meant his bikes steadily improved. They were reliable and got better each year. But equally important, Takeo Fujisawa helped craft brilliant marketing and distribution. They didn't just build good motorcycles, they found better ways to sell them. For example, by the mid-1950s, Honda's bikes had such a good reputation that word-of-mouth demand was exploding. Fujisawa organized a novel distribution system where Honda salesmen literally drove trucks of bikes from town to town across Japan, personally demoing and delivering to local dealers. They went to the customers rather than waiting in Tokyo. This boots-on-the-ground approach built relationships and trust. It was unconventional, but it worked. By 1955, just 7 years after starting, Honda became the #1 motorcycle manufacturer in Japan, leaving hundreds of rivals in the dust. Soichiro wasn't content with just domestic success. He had a bigger vision: to be a world-class manufacturer. He believed that to truly test your product, you should face the world's best on the racetrack. Remember that racing bug he had? It never went away. He famously said, "If Honda does not race, there is no Honda." Racing was a way to push the limits of technology and prove your mettle. So in 1959, Honda became the first Japanese motorcycle maker to enter the legendary Isle of Man TT race, the toughest, most dangerous motorcycle race in the world at the time. They didn't win that year. In fact, they faced several technical failures in early attempts. But Honda's team learned and improved. By 1961, they took home their first trophies in the World Grand Prix circuit, shocking the established European makers. This relentless drive to compete and improve quickly translated into superior bikes for customers. By the early 1960s, Honda had begun exporting worldwide, and riders from Asia to Europe to America loved the affordable, robust Hondas. The real breakthrough in the West came with one iconic model, the Honda Super Cub. Introduced in 1958 as a simple 50cc bike for everyone, it became a global phenomenon. You probably know it by the later US slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." The Super Cub was cheap, reliable, and ridiculously fuel efficient, perfect for the post-war boom in affordable transport. It was so successful that it eventually became the most produced motor vehicle in history, with over 100 million Super Cubs built worldwide. Yes, 100 million. More than a Model T, more than a VW Beetle, any of them. That's the power of a great product combined with a great vision. Soichiro Honda wanted to empower ordinary people with mobility, and that vision drove the creation of a product that truly conquered the world. By 1959, Honda opened its first dealership in the United States, entering a market dominated by big bikes like Harley-Davidson. The American riders initially saw small Japanese bikes as a joke, but Honda's clever marketing, the Nicest People campaign in 1963, changed that image fast. Sales skyrocketed, and then an incredible thing happened. Honda motorcycles started outselling even the venerable Harley-Davidson in America and Triumph in England, beating the homegrown brands in their own backyards. Think about the magnitude of that. A little company from a war-torn country, a total underdog, overtook established giants on their home turf. By the mid-1960s, Honda was the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer and a household name. Soichiro Honda had gone global. How? By never sacrificing quality, by innovating in products and marketing, and by daring to go where others hadn't. He didn't stop at small bikes or local markets. He kept pushing outward. And as his motorcycle business reached the pinnacle, he set his sights on an even bigger dream, one that many thought was downright crazy: cars. Most people would ride the high of being the world's top motorcycle maker and play it safe. Not Soichiro Honda. In the late 1950s, as his bikes were conquering roads worldwide, he had another vision. He loved cars. Remember, he'd built and raced them in his youth, and he wanted Honda to build cars too. But Japan's government wasn't keen on a small motorcycle company jumping into the car industry. In fact, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry in Japan tried to block Honda from making cars in the early 1960s. They had a plan to consolidate the auto industry and didn't want new entrants. They effectively told Honda, "Stick to what you're good at. Don't pursue cars." Well, telling Soichiro Honda to not do something was the surest way to fire him up. He once quipped, "If our team had to run a business analysis, we would never have ventured into the car business. I simply made a list of the weaknesses of the world's biggest car makers, and that list was quite long." In other words, he didn't care what the conventional wisdom was or what the government said. He saw an opportunity to do better than the existing car companies, and he went for it. The lesson is, don't let naysayers or expert analysis kill your dream if you truly believe and have done your homework. Sometimes vision is greater than permission. Blocked from immediately entering the car market, Honda took a clever detour: racing. He decided to prove Honda's engineering prowess on the world stage by entering Formula One racing, the pinnacle of car racing. A bold move for a company that hadn't mass-produced a single car yet. They built a racing car, and by 1965, just a few years later, Honda won the Formula One Grand Prix in Mexico, beating the likes of Ferrari and Lotus. The racing success silenced a lot of doubters. It demonstrated that Honda's technology could compete with the best in the world. Over the next few years, they also dominated in Formula 2 racing with 11 consecutive wins. Soichiro was showing the world, we know engines, we know cars, and we're coming. By the late 1960s, Honda got the green light to mass-produce cars. Soichiro's first production car models, like the tiny Honda N360 and the sporty S600, hit the market. They were different from the big American sedans or even the established Japanese models. They were small, efficient, and fun. But the real jackpot came in 1972 with the launch of the Honda Civic. Soichiro's team had developed an ingenious new engine technology called CVCC, Compound Vortex Controlled Combustion, which made the Civic meet the strict US emission standards of the 1970s without a catalytic converter. While Detroit's giants were struggling to make clean engines to comply with the Clean Air Act, little Honda had cracked the code. The Civic got great gas mileage just as the world faced the oil crisis, and it ran clean. It was the right car at the right time. The Civic became a massive hit globally. In America, its sales took off like a rocket, even becoming the #1 selling car in the US at one point in the small car category. Honda suddenly went from newcomer to a major player in automobiles. By 1973, just 25 years after its founding, Honda Motor Co. was so successful internationally that they decided to open a production plant in the United States, a nearly unthinkable move for a Japanese company back then. Think about the irony. The same country that bombed Soichiro's factory to smithereens in World War II was now welcoming his company to build cars on their soil because Americans loved his products. Soichiro Honda retired in 1973 as president of Honda on the 25th anniversary of the company. He stepped down at the top, with Honda firmly established as a global automotive and motorcycle powerhouse. People magazine later called him the Japanese Henry Ford. But in truth, he was one of a kind. In his lifetime, he saw his company grow from a tiny shack to a multi-billion-dollar multinational. More importantly for him, he saw ideas that once lived only in his head, the cheap motorbike, the small car that could beat the big guys, become reality for millions of customers. Even after retirement, Soichiro stayed on as a supreme advisor and kept tinkering in workshops until his final days. He pursued hobbies like hang gliding and painting, living life with the same zeal he brought to business. He never stopped moving, never stopped dreaming, right up until he passed away in 1991, leaving a legacy that's visible every time you see a Honda logo. So what can you take away from this incredible journey? Let's break down the key lessons from Soichiro Honda's life that you can apply to your own entrepreneurial path. Number 1, persistence in the face of failure. Soichiro Honda failed hard and often. His first factory output was 90% unusable. His plants were bombed to rubble, yet he never saw failure as the end. He saw it as a lesson. Remember his words, success is 99% failure. Every setback was just one step closer to getting it right. When you hit a wall, don't turn around. Climb over it or break through it. Most businesses face early failures. About 50% of startups fail within 5 years. But the ones that succeed are the ones that keep going after failure. Take Honda's story to heart and let your failures refine you, not define you. Number 2, embrace rejection and prove the doubters wrong. Honda was rejected time and time again by Toyota's inspectors, by bankers, even by government officials who told him to stay out of cars. Instead of internalizing rejection, he used it as fuel. You will face naysayers, investors who don't bite, customers who choose a competitor, friends or family who think you're crazy. Don't let their no stop you. Let it light a fire under you. As Honda said, instead of being afraid of the challenge and failure, be afraid of avoiding the challenge and doing nothing. The only sure way to fail is not to try. Soichiro Honda pawned his wife's jewelry to keep his dream alive during tough times. That's how all in he was. Believe in yourself enough to stick with your vision even when others don't. Number 3, innovate and play to your strengths. Honda was an inventor at heart. From forging stamps as a kid to creating new engine designs as an adult, he was obsessed with innovation and doing things differently. When he couldn't get good piston metal, he learned metallurgy. When fuel was scarce, he repurposed a radio engine for a bicycle. When big car companies were complacent, he out-engineered them with a CVCC engine. The lesson? Be a problem solver and think outside the box. Innovation is your edge. Also know your strengths and lean into them. Honda knew he was great with engineering but not finance, so he partnered with Fujisawa to handle the business side. As a result, the company had the best of both worlds. Build a team that complements your skills. You don't have to do it all alone. Number 4, quality and customer focus create luck. Honda had an unwavering commitment to quality and understanding the customer's needs. He personally rebuilt engines to ensure they wouldn't fail on his early customers. He listened to feedback, even from his wife's first test ride, and made improvements. He also understood the market. Post-war consumers needed affordable, efficient vehicles, so that's what he made. By meeting real needs and making truly great products, Honda got lucky in the market. But it wasn't luck, it was insight and dedication. Focus on delivering value and opportunities will find you. Honda Super Cub didn't become the world's best-selling motorbike by accident. It earned that status by genuinely solving problems for millions of people. Number 5, stay humble and keep learning. Despite his success, Soichiro Honda never became an aloof executive. He wore the same white work overalls as any factory worker because he believed in equality and keeping hands-on. He was known to walk the factory floor, getting his hands dirty, and kept learning new things even into old age. He learned to fly planes in his 70s. This attitude built loyalty in his team and kept him in touch with reality. The takeaway: never think any task is below you and never stop learning. Industries evolve, and the moment you think you know it all, you're done. Honda's lifelong learner mindset allowed him to pivot from bikes to cars to whatever came next. Be curious, be humble, and surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow. Each of these lessons come back to a core idea. Success is a mindset before it's a reality. Soichiro Honda's story is extraordinary, but it's not just luck or genius. It's attitude, resilience, and vision. And those are things you can cultivate in your own journey. So now what's stopping you from achieving your dream? Maybe you've had failures. Maybe you're in the middle of one right now. Maybe people are telling you no, it'll never work, or stick to what you know. I want you to think about Soichiro Honda, a poor blacksmith's son with no degree who blew his first big chance spectacularly, saw his factories reduced to ashes, and still came back to create one of the most successful companies on the planet. He didn't let failure stop him. He let it sculpt him. Every time life said, give up, he said, what's the next step? He kept his vision in focus, whether it was a piston ring, a motorbike for the masses, or a car that could change the world. And he did change the world. One invention, one race, one bike, one car at a time. Honda's journey teaches us that the only real limit is how much you're willing to endure and learn on the road to your goal. As an entrepreneur, your mindset is your greatest asset. Fall in love with the problem you're solving. Take pride in your work. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. And when things inevitably go wrong, remember Soichiro Honda standing in the rubble of his dreams, deciding that this was not the end, but the beginning of something new. So now it's your turn. Take that leap, embrace the challenges. When you fail, laugh, learn, and get back up. Dare to dream like Honda did and work like heck to make it real. Your journey will have bumps. That's okay. Every failure is just another step closer to success if you keep moving. Soichiro Honda believed in the power of dreams and persistence, and he proved that one person with a dream can impact millions. You have that power too. So go on, write your own story of persistence, innovation, and impact. And whenever you feel that doubt creeping in, remember this: the guy whose name is on millions of engines worldwide started with less than you have right now. If he could do it, why not you? Keep pushing forward, turn your failures into fuel, and never stop dreaming. Believe. To watch Elon Musk's success story, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there. Elon Reeve Musk was born to a Canadian mother and South African father on June 28, 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa.